For today's video, we're heading out into the Peak District to go to Crome Hill, or Dragon's Back, which is adjacent to Parkhouse Hill. It's a lovely spot. We're aiming for a nice sunset today. As you can see, we've got quite a spectacular sunset, and the views over the Dragon's Back, or Crome Hill, were absolutely magnificent. It's one of the best sunsets I've ever seen. Okay, we're on our way again. So this morning we were out on the Deville for a few hours and we caught a nice sunrise. This evening we're out on the VFR and we're going for a sunset. We'll be heading over to Crome Hill, also known as Dragon's Back, which is a very pretty piece of the landscape in the Peak District, and I'm hoping to get a nice shot with the rugged spikes of the land in it. It will take us 1 hour to get there, so we're going to make the most of this lovely spring evening and ride over to the peaks again. So the observant ones amongst you will have noticed I'm in a slightly casual outfit tonight. This is the original Bellstaff leather jacket I bought for my trike, which was a Suzuki TL1000 trike that I built, and I quite like it. So when it's nice like today, where it's 14 degrees, positively balmy, I don't need too much warmth. This is great for it. These aren't normal jeans, they're Kevlar jeans, so they are reinforced with armour in them. But it's just nice to be in a slightly more casual get-up from time to time, especially on a spring-summer's evening. Certainly better than going out in one-piece leathers, that's for sure. I did think about it tonight, but when we get to the hill, we are likely to need to do a decent-ish amount of walking. That's another reason I wanted to have a fairly casual setup on. Otherwise I'll be baking on the way up the hill. It's amazing how much colder you are on a bike than just milling about, and conversely, if you're wearing that bike gear and start climbing a hill, you get warm very quickly. So this is the best of both worlds. Sterndale. Sterndale is a nice place to start the walk from. A lot of the walks you'll find online will tell you about Sterndale, which is where we are now. It is a good spot to start the walk from. We're going to try and sneak in really quite close to the bottom of Crome Hill and park on a grass verge. I did do a quick check and I couldn't see any bylaws prohibiting it, and it is generally legal to park on a grass verge. Just don't be an idiot. There are lots of gates around here that look like they have lay-bys next to them, where they're for farmers to move cows through, so I don't park there. There's a lovely spot that's all hard standing with gravel on it, looks great, and it's where the tractors turn around, so we won't be parking there either. But one of the verges up here looked like it would be suitable for our needs. Right, so down to the right here, I think this is the path I was expecting to come in on, and it's now a very sharp right turn onto gravel. Great. Okay. Okay, so all my Google Map planning is in the bin. Oh, we get a little Ford as well, fantastic. Everything you want on a journey. So today's video has been shot on the 15-35 RF lens from Canon. This is a superb lens for landscape. This has the standard Canon petal on it and a UV filter. You've got two switches to control. One is to switch between autofocus and manual focus. We used autofocus for the shot today, and stabilizer on and off. Stabilizer was on, and I generally use that at all times unless I'm using a tripod. The wide aperture of the 2.8 comes in very handy for low light conditions, and if you're into landscape photography, you could do a lot worse than to get one of these. Cracking lens, really recommend it. So Chrome Hill being quite a wide landscape shot, we were using a small hole in the lens. The aperture was up at f11. That's quite a common aperture to use on landscape shots for me. In terms of the ISO, we were balancing between the light failing as the sun dropped and being able to pick up the details on the hill. 400 was a nice place to be for that, which is generally a good target for me. We were working at the 15mm end of the lens's range, so as wide as it goes, and we used 3 shots. We used 1/25th, 1/60th, and 1/200th of a second. In terms of other settings, we were using electronic shutter. It wouldn't have mattered if we used mechanical or electronic for this shot. Subject to detect was set to none, and we were doing single shooting. And that's it for today. So as you can see, the views were spectacular towards Parkhouse Hill as the sun started to drop. That's Dragon's Back with the light just falling on it nicely. And the sunset was truly spectacular. One of the best I've ever seen for sure. That shows you how vast the sky is up there. It was a very special evening. And this shot was just heading back down to the bike. It's the kind of shot that you couldn't take without the 2.8 aperture. Okay, into the picture itself then. This first picture is to show the spines of Dragon's Back, and they're exposed quite nicely. You can see the orangey light falling on the greenery here from the sunset. So that's our base background. Behind that is a mid layer. We've got the sky coming out in more detail, and the final one is to bring out the sun. So it's just a stack of 3 images to make equivalent to an HDR picture. So we'll start with our background. We'll move to our mid layer, select all, copy, paste as a new layer, and then our dark layer, select all, copy, paste as a new layer. So we'll close down the other 2 images. We now have the 3 shots stacked as different layers in this image, brightest at the back, middle in the middle, and darkest at the front. So looking at the hills, they look great as they are. I don't want to increase shadows and highlights at this stage until I've put the rest of the sky in. So we'll look at how well layer 1 lines on top of it. We've got, fortunately, hills in both pictures that we can use to line them up. These were shot handheld. There will be movement between shots. So I'm selecting the Move tool, and I'm just going to nudge these using the arrow keys. Okay, so we have a base image, a middle image, and a top image. You can see there is rotation on that top image. So we're going to deal with that first. Okay, because I've got a rotation effect in this image, I'm going to go back to the original, and then I'm going to go to Image, Rotation, and Arbitrary, and then I'm going to rotate that a couple of degrees, in fact 1 degree, anti-clockwise. Now what I'll do is I'll just grab that image, copy and paste it over the top as a new layer, and I'll see how well that aligns now. Okay, that will do nicely. So layer 1, layer 2, layer 3. Now, because we've changed the angle of this, the crop will need to be applied to get rid of the edges. I want to keep as much of the image in as possible. So where the edges have misaligned, we'll crop those out. Okay. So layer 1, nice solid background image. I'd like to look at vibrance and saturation, but probably after we bring in the sky. So the first thing I want to do is mask layer 2 so it doesn't lose the foreground. So I'll go to layer 1 and select the foreground. So So I'll use the quick selection tool and I'll just run it across the horizon and then pull down to the base of the grass. That's given me a reasonable effort of a selection. I'm just going to pull it in around these edges quite a bit. So with this, I'm holding Shift to add to the selection and Alt to remove from the selection as I drag around. Because we're going to be pulling the sky in using this mask, I'd rather it was slightly under the hill than over the hill. So if we darken the top of the hill, I'm not too concerned about that. But if we have a gap where the sky is, that's going to stand out like a sore thumb when we start merging the layers. Okay, so there's the selection. So we've selected all the foreground essentially. What we'll do now is we'll go to the second layer and create a layer mask. So by creating a mask using that layer, we've actually kept in everything from the foreground in the layer, and we want the opposite. So we're going to do image adjustments invert, and it will keep everything from the sky but lose the foreground. Now this looks very unnatural on the horizon, and we will deal with that momentarily. But first we're looking at the sky and how that looks, and the answer is pretty good. So we'll look at layer 3, and that's got an even better sky. So this one we'll do slightly differently. We'll create a layer mask and we will get rid of the entire sky, and we'll do that by using the bucket tool and a black fill, which clears the mask essentially. We'll then move back to white and we're going to use a big brush. So we're going to go up to sort of 1300, 1400 pixels. Now my opacity wants to be quite low. I'm going to set it about 10%, and then I'm going to brush in around the sun just to pull through the detail from this top layer. I don't want to lose too much of this sky because it's quite nice from layer 2, but I do want the sun to come through. This is unfortunate. It's just a piece of worn grass by the looks of things. It just looks a little out of place. We could artificially get rid of that, but I'm not going to alter the image in that respect. There are opportunities for us to use a crop to deal with it or minimize it, and that may be something we consider actually. So if we look at our layers in reverse order, we've got the sun we're pulling through from layer 3, the sky comes through with layer 2, and layer 1 fills in the foreground. So we're just going to flatten that image, selecting all the layers and merging them, and that gives us one image to work with. So I'm going to go image adjustments and HDR toning. We can pull up the shadows to increase the saturation in them, and I quite like that on the hills. If you go too far, it looks very unnatural. If you take it far to the left, it goes very dark. So we've just really made the image a bit punchier. We'll go shadows and highlights. So two things I don't like. One is having a road in the image, and the other is this little patch we've got here. Now, this section of sky on the left isn't adding a lot of value to the image. This is where the good stuff's at. So I think we can have quite an aggressive crop and use this corner of the hill as the border for the image. So I'm going to draw roughly where I think that would look okay. Now I'm losing a little bit of the sunset, but a lot of distraction. So I'm going to see what that looks like. I can always undo this, I don't have to stick with it. That feels like the focal point is now where you want it to be, on the dragon's back. And we've still got a nice sunset shown in the image, and we've got the offset of the orange with the blue sky to the right. So that feels like a better image. I'm inclined to boost the sky a little bit. So I'm looking at the saturation of the blues. So I'm going to go to image adjustments and then selective color. And I'm going to look at the blues and see if I can change the black point of the blues, which is how bright and dark the blues are. So I'm just going to pull that to the right to darken those and bring out that colour a bit more. And it feels like we've got quite a nice balance between the blue, the orange and the green at this point. Okay, do we need to tweak any of the yellow? Can go a little bit to the left with the yellow to give a really punchy image. Yeah, I quite like that. I'll just create another layer. I'm going to do a curves brightness, so Control M for curves, and just pull up the bottom of the image a little bit and see what that looks like. I think that works okay. I like what it's doing to the foreground. I like the hills being a bit brighter. I'm not so sure I like what it's doing up here in the sky. So I'm going to put a layer mask on that now. So I'm just going to use a brush and black to remove the mask. And I'm going to use a big brush and opacity, let's say 20-ish%. And I'm just going to remove some of that effect on the sky. I don't really want that to be boosted in the same way. So before, after. Okay, still a bit of brightness on the sky, so I'm going to do a bit more. Okay, that's better. I'm also thinking that these hills here need to be darker. It's really just the dragon that I want to brighten, so I'm just going to pull this down a little as well. Okay, so before, after. We really are just brightening around these front hills at that point, which I like. So on this second layer, I'm just going to open curves with Control M. And because of the mask that we've got, we're only really affecting the hills of the dragon's back now. So if I pull that down, you'll see this. And what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to boost this just a little further and see how far I can go, because it shouldn't be affecting the rest of the image too much now. So I can really boost the hills up, not quite that much. A lot brighter, that's much nicer. I'm happy with that. And then if I go to the original image behind it, conversely, any changes I make there will affect everything but the hills. I'm just going to pull the sky down a little bit. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to quickly duplicate the back layer, and I'm going to pop that at the front. So I'll add a mask to that, and I'm just going to disable that whole layer. And it'll allow me to then brush in bits of the layer that I like. We will merge those layers, and this is what we're left with. I am tempted to crop in some more of this right hand side and make the focal point fill the frame with the dragon's back and the sunset. So I'm just going to see what that would look like if I were to bring in quite a hard crop. Okay, I think I like that. So one of the joys of having the 45 megapixel Canon sensor is that you can afford to crop in like this, and you can still have a really good high-res image, still make out the details of a sheep on a hill quite a way away. So that's nice. The last thing I'm going to look at is levels, Control L, and I'm just going to go to the black point, the left slider, and I'm going to roll that forward a little bit, which will darken everything. And I'm just going to see how well that fits the image. I think probably about 12. I think that will do. So if we undo that and then redo it, so it just pulls out a bit more colour and detail. So I can stand to lose some of the sky. I can also bring this top third line down towards the horizon by doing that. So that should be aesthetically quite a nice image. Good colours, really bright, vibrant green, orange and blue, and a decent view of the landscape with the highlight on the dragon's back. So I'll give that a few minutes and see if I still like it. Okay, so essentially I like the image. Two things I'd like to do. One is make it overall brighter, so that would affect the whole image. The other thing I'd like to do is increase the contrast between the brights and the darks. So I'm going to go image adjustments and brightness and contrast. And the first thing I'm going to do is boost the contrast to a level I like, which is probably about there. And then I'm going to boost the overall brightness of the image, probably about there. So I'm at 18 and 18 as it happens. So if we look at the before image, and then after brightness and contrast, you can see it just pops it even further. I think I'm happy with it. So I'm just going to create a new layer. And I'm using a big brush, 1000 pixels, on shadows at 10%. And I've got the burn tool on, which will just darken anything I roll over. And what I'm looking to do is increase focus on the spine, the ridge here, and detract a little bit from this hill in the background. So I'm just going to quickly brush over this hill and just darken it down a bit in a few places. And then I'm going to zoom in and take the edges of it down as well with a smaller brush. Okay, let's have a look at the before and the after. I like that. I'd like to pull this bit down as well. Okay, and then maybe a tiny bit more brightness. Yeah, I think I like that. So that's +6. Okay, I'm going to call that the final image. So I hope you enjoyed that one. Apart from the disaster at the end, it was a spectacular sunset. Really, really worth the visit. So I'd highly recommend that one. A bit of a climb up, but worth it if you can. If you enjoyed the video, please do stick around for more content of a similar nature.